Welcome in, everybody, to Fantasy Pros. This is the Fantasy Football Podcast. It is me, Joey P, Joe Pizzapia. That, of course, is Andrew Erickson and Pat Fitzmaurice. And as always, it's you joining us for Week 16. It's start or sit time. That's right. Congratulations. You've made it to the second round. And what do you get? More COVID tests. That's right. Welcome, everybody, because everything we say can and will be obsolete potentially in the next hour as we're recording this show. But you can always hit us up, obviously, on the Twitter machine, and we're here on our Discord chat as well. We've got so many things and so much access to us, so we'll always be here to answer your questions. And of course, don't forget about the amazing tools and our rankings over at FantasyPros.com, which will keep you up to date with everything going on. And if you haven't already, make sure you get that News Desk app that we have as well, because the news app for Fantasy Pros is going to keep you updated with everything going on constantly. And now more than ever, you need that app, that's for sure. Gentlemen, I know we're in the playoffs, and Pat, you are representing us so well. I mean, you got to the Scott Fishbowl peak here. You are right on the precipice, but the problem is it doesn't feel like you got enough left here to get the job done. But I'm still rooting for the underdog here, buddy.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I'm leaking oil, Joe. No Chris Godwin, maybe no Tyreek Hill. Those are two of the key engines, and if they're not firing, I don't think I'm going to be firing into the finals in Week 17.
Well, I got a couple advances to round twos. Andrew, how about you? You got a couple advancements here after a shaky Week 15?
Yeah, no, I squeaked by half a point last night because of a Rashad Penny run in like the fourth quarter. So I was just able to get it done, squeaked my way. I was able to move on. I ended up making the playoffs in the majority of the leagues I was in, and probably, I think 5 of them, I was able to move on to the second round. So again, it'll probably be less next week, but as long as I can get, at least one to that, Week 17 championship, I'll be happy.
There you go. And also, you'll be happy if you can get an Alvin Kamara autographed jersey just for you. And all you got to do is go to fantasypros.com/contest to get it. Here's what you do. You subscribe to our YouTube channel at Fantasy Pros. So you go to youtube.com/fantasypros. You subscribe. You click that little bell for the notifications every time a piece of glorious content comes out. You'll be the first to know about it before anybody else. All right. And then you screenshot that. You go to fantasypros.com/contest. And just like that, you'll be entered to win, and that's thanks to our friends at Pristine Auction. And look, our YouTube channel is phenomenal. Not only are all the podcasts on there, but we've got the live streams where we answer your questions, which are super popular. We've got the short form videos, the long form videos. We're going to have our draft coverage coming up in January, February, March. We're going to have baseball on our baseball channel. Go check that out. We got Betting Pros, which is a separate channel too. So the family of YouTube Fantasy Pros is growing and growing, and we want you to be a part of it too. Help us grow and help your bankroll and your fantasy experiences grow as well by checking out all of our entries. But make sure it all starts with our Fantasy Pros main channel, which is the hub for all of our football content here at Fantasy Pros. So, gentlemen, let's kick things off with the running backs in the top 20 for Week 16 in the NFL, round 2 of the playoffs, that we feel a little bit shaky about. Andrew, let's start with you today. Who's the running back that you feel a little worried about or concerned going into this playoff round 2?
For me, it's Saquon Barkley. And I don't know. I mean, I don't have any Saquon Barkley, but I can't imagine anyone has really felt great about playing him at like any point during the season. That's how I feel when I try to rank him every single week. I'm like, good matchup. Like maybe I can rank him a little higher. But he's just kind of in that middling RB2 range, with all the teams, all 32 teams in action. And I don't know. I'm just like not excited to play him. Again, he played the Eagles a couple weeks ago, 13 carries for 40 yards in the first matchup. Basically, you're just hoping that the Giants fall behind and he catches a bunch of dump-off passes. But the problem with that is when they fall behind by so much, they don't play him anymore. And he comes out of the game entirely. They put in Devontae Booker. The announcers in last week's games kept, Devontae Booker kept making big plays, and they kept thinking it was Barkley. And it's just like, what is going on here? So there's just a lot of scenarios where I can see Barkley failing, and I'm just not super thrilled to be playing him. I think I have him right at 20 in my rankings this week.
Yeah, it's funny. I've got Barkley in a couple leagues because I like to take a few chances. And when his draft stock fell to a certain point, I said, well, I'll give it a shot. And actually in 2 leagues, I've still got him. And even in the playoffs, I'm still, every week I start him and I just kind of duck. It's not a good feeling. You don't feel confident. And it's capped. I think that's the biggest problem is the explosiveness, big play, game-breaking Saquon Barkley is just not a version we've seen this year. And I hope we see it again in his career, but I am not holding my breath. Pat, when you're looking at the top 20 of running backs, who are you holding your breath with?
I'm a little concerned about Ezekiel Elliott, kind of another guy in that class of normal rock stars who are just not having a vintage season for what we're used to with them. Since Halloween, Zeke has not had more than 52 rushing yards in a game. He's averaged 3.4 yards per carry over that time. He just doesn't have the burst anymore. Like on any outside run, he just cannot get to the corner and get into the second level for a big gain. And now Tony Pollard's healthy again, or at least healthy enough to play with that plantar fascia injury. I can never say that well.
Try once more, see if it works.
Plantar fascia. So, there is at least a little bit of production in the passing game for Zeke to have kind of a floor. He does get like 20 to 30 receiving yards most games. So the floor is stable, but man, there's just not much of a ceiling there. And if you really need to land some sort of heavy punch in the playoffs against a tough opponent, I don't know if you're going to get it from Zeke.
Yeah, Zeke is ranked 12th overall there, and Saquon Barkley, I'm trying to look at where he is 18th. My guy's even higher. It's Cordarrelle Patterson, and I just don't like the trend of where things are going here with Patterson these last few weeks. It's a great matchup against Detroit in theory. However, the Detroit D's played pretty well over the last couple weeks. I mean, they've shown up. Anzalone's been really good, and they had a couple other guys really step up here in this void, and they play hard. And I'm just wondering if maybe Cordarrelle Patterson is running out of gas. It's a long season. He's had a lot more usage than he's probably ever had in his entire career. So I just kind of wonder if it's almost a stamina thing with him. Are you going to play him? Yeah. Do I feel good about it? No. Am I interviewing myself? Yes, I am. That being said, let's move on to the guys on the fringe of RB, the guys who are RB 2/3s, possibly flex plays this week, and see if we can find two guys that we like to start. Pat, we'll start with you with this one. Who are two guys you feel good about on this fringe of RB2 that you think are worthy of starting?
Well, he was in RB1 range for me last week, and it's Rhamondre Stevenson. And we did not get the game we were hoping for against the Colts. It seemed like the Colts were run blitzing pretty much every time Stevenson took a handoff, and they were just kind of prepared for it. So we haven't really gotten that suitable follow-up to Stevenson's 100-yard, 2 TD game against the Browns like a month ago. And I mean, man, with Damian Harris dealing with this hamstring injury, it looked like the runway was clear for him last week. Didn't happen. We don't know what Harris's status is going to be this week, but I do think the Patriots are going to try to run the ball against the Bills. They did so successfully in that crazy wind game, throwing only 3 times a couple of weeks ago. And I think they kind of want to have that philosophy, like we are the more physical of these, the more physical team in this rivalry. And I think they're going to keep hammering away with the running game, and I think Stevenson, even if Harris is back, I think he's playable this week. I think he's finally going to break through and deliver for the people who start him.
All right, so Stevenson's one. I agree with you. I feel pretty good about starting him too. Who's the second one?
This is a sneakier one. Jordan Howard. Like, this normally isn't my kind of guy, the guy who doesn't factor into the receiving game at all, but like we didn't know how the Eagles were going to deploy their running backs going into Week 15 because I think all 4 of them were active. And the answer was pretty clear. It was Miles Sanders is the 1, Jordan Howard is the number 2, and no one else mattered. And Howard still, as the number 2, managed to get 15 carries that he turned into 69 yards. And like we have seen the Eagles turn into a Big Ten team as far as running the ball. Like, they have run the ball in 63% of their offensive plays since week 8. So even as the number 2 guy in an offense like that, you can be very fantasy relevant. And, they're going against a Giants defense that has yielded, I believe, the 8th most fantasy points to running backs. So, he's kind of on the fringes of start-sit territory, but if you're hurting at running back, I could see using him and feeling not too terrible about it.
All right, Andrew, who do you not feel so terrible about starting at the running back position this week, who's on that RB3 tier?
So I think that Devin Singletary, if Zach Moss is inactive, like that's like the skeleton key. That's the code that you're like, all right, green light, Devin Singletary. I can put him in my starting lineup. Just got to wait for the notification at 11:30 Eastern. All right, Zach Moss inactive. All right, fire up Devin Singletary, because that's when we've seen Singletary being used the most, especially over the last 2 weeks. He has an 88% snap share. 33 out of the 37 total running back touches. Now, it's not a lot. The Bills don't necessarily feature their running backs as often as a lot of other teams, but if you look at the Patriots defense, they are way more susceptible on the ground than they are through the air. Like, their secondary is healthy, so they're going to be able to limit this Bills passing attack to an extent where there are going to be lanes where the Bills they need to take that. Like, they need to be able to run the football if they want to win the game. And that's ultimately what they want to do when they go into Foxborough. So I think that Devin Singletary, he's the starting running back for the Buffalo Bills. I know traditionally we've been avoiding the Bills like the plague, especially their running backs. But in this case, what they've shown us over the last couple of weeks, providing more confidence that Singletary makes a lot of sense as like a back-end fantasy RB2.
All right, so that's one. Give me a second guy you feel good about starting.
So it was Michael Carter because they're playing the Jaguars, but then Michael Carter went on the COVID list. So I'm just moving a tier down to Tevin Coleman, who honestly, he's looked good all year long. Like whenever he's played, he's been breaking tackles. He's ranked really high in terms of PFF's elusive rating this year when he's had his carries. Ty Johnson, pouring one out for my guy, but he wasn't healthy and active last week because they're just like over him. So it's Austin Walter is Tevin Coleman's backup if Michael Carter can't go. So, yeah, I think Tevin Coleman makes a ton of sense in a soft matchup against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Coleman has been good in all of his starts. He's going to get the work at the goal line, and the Jets should be able to put up some points on a pretty bad Jags defense. I mean, someone's going to score in this game. I know they have a projected point total. It's probably not going to be a lot. It's going to be gross, but I think Tevin Coleman, especially if Michael Carter is not there, we saw them kind of split the backfield last week. If it's all Tevin Coleman, I think you can expect double-digit carries, probably a touchdown.
All right, let's circle back to you, Pat, here for guys that we want to sit this week. I know it's getting very tight here at the running back position, and every single passing hour it gets a little tighter, but who do you really just want to avoid at all costs right now in terms of those guys who are on that fringe of RB2?
Well, we had gotten used to the idea of DeVonta Freeman as this bankable running back 2 for the second half of the regular season, and he had given us kind of this safe floor with his workload. I think he'd had 6 straight games with double-digit carries and averaged 17.3 touches over that span. But the safe floor just kind of crumbled away last week against the Packers with Latavius Murray getting this expanded workload. Like he had a snap share of under 30% in the 2 games prior, but he played like 41% of the snaps against the Packers and looked pretty good, actually. And Freeman's streak of double-digit carries snapped. He had 6 for 22. Not very good. So, I'm just a little nervous. This is sort of the trend, and I'm not ready to reinvest, I guess, in Devonta Freeman in a key week, not knowing if we're going to get those double-digit carries.
All right, so Freeman is out for Pat. Who else is riding the pine?
Chuba Hubbard. I mean, another guy who we had seen him treated as a workhorse the first time that Christian McCaffrey was hurt, but since McCaffrey went on IR in those 2 games, Hubbard's been outsnapped by Amir Abdullah 78-61. So he's just not getting the same sort of workload, workhorse treatment. And he's also not doing much in the passing game over that span. I think he just has 1 catch in his last 2 games. So kind of not too interested in Chuba anymore.
Yeah, I got to be honest with you, Pat. I did not buy into the Chuba fascination the first time around, too, because even when he had that full workhorse workload, of the horse back in there, it just felt like, I don't know, he was topping out somewhere around RB18. Wasn't something very exciting, really. I mean, it was just kind of like, yeah, he's there, it's fine, and in the bye weeks you could kind of roll with it, but that whole team, it just feels like Carolina's coming apart at the seams, and I think the worst time to be running into angry Tom Brady for them, certainly not a good combination of things. Andrew, who do you want to sit this week potentially over at the running back position?
So for me, it's Deontay Foreman for the Tennessee Titans, and I get that it's tougher to sit a player that has been producing for you the last couple of weeks, but we're in the playoffs right now. And you got to take everything week by week basis. And if you look at the 2 matchups he's had, Jaguars, Steelers, really bad run defenses, they were able to play with the lead in both those games. So positive game script. So Foreman has played. Last week he had 24 carries, but it was under a 40% snap share. Like, he's running on extremely thin margins, and I have major concerns of, okay, if the 49ers get up in this game, or the 49ers play bully ball and have the ball the entire game, because that's what they do, they just have these really long drives, I don't have a lot of faith in this Titans offense overall. Like, there's just a severe lack of playmakers. We're still seeing Dontrell Hilliard get involved, get touches, Jeremy McNichols get touches. I mean, those 3 guys almost all combined for, 40, 45 touches last week. All they do is use the running backs. They don't throw to their wide receivers. So I have concerns about if they do fall behind in this game, they are underdogs at home. I'm concerned that Foreman can get game scripted out of this game. So, and if you look at the 49ers defense, it's a much tougher matchup than what Foreman's faced. They've led 0 running backs to rush for more than 60 yards since week 9. So Deontay Foreman, yeah, he's been great, but look, he's not a stud by any means. Like, you don't need to feel you have to start Deontay Foreman just because he's been good for you. Like, look at the matchup, evaluate who else you have on your team, and if Foreman doesn't make the cut, then you put him on your bench.
All right, let's play a little game of Who Should I Start, which is courtesy of our Who Should I Start tool over at fantasypros.com/start. It's free to use, so if you're trying to figure out between a few guys, well, plug in the names and see what the tool says. And let's play a little Who Should I Start with Rhamondre Stevenson, or let's give it a new one in here because we have, obviously, Michael Carter not available anymore as of the last hour. So let's take both of your guys here, Pat. Michael Carter, Rhamondre Stevenson or Jordan Howard. Who would you rather start between those two guys?
I got to go with Rhamondre there.
Okay.
Just the better offense. I think it's the slightly better running game. Just a little more confidence in the Patriots to get favorable game script.
All right. How about you, Andrew? Jordan Howard, who, kind of there. And let's even throw in Damian Harris active for this game. I assume that would kind of put them on a more bankable, similar tier for you guys, too. So let's throw in the wrinkle. Let's say Harris is back playing. So there's Miles Sanders involved. There's Harris involved. Everyone's on this, unhappy situation here. Would you rather start Stevenson or would you rather start Jordan Howard?
So, yeah, if Harris is active, I think I would rather start Jordan Howard. I mean, what they'd used him like in their Tuesday night matchup was like he is their, close out the game guy. Like most of his carries and yards actually came in the second half. I mean, they're 10.5-point favorites at home against Jake Fromm and the Giants. Like Jordan Howard, I could see just like scooping up a ton of yardage, touchdowns at the end of the game when you have just this Giants team that's just running dead right now. So I think Jordan Howard, again, the Patriots-Bills game seems like it's going to be much more competitive, and depending on who takes the lead first is going to force which other team to do something else. Like, the Patriots will have to throw if the Bills get a lead, and if they don't, then they'll run. Whereas the Eagles, they're running no matter what. I know that for a fact, and they can run over any defense that they've played so far this year. So I would lean towards Howard if Harris is active.
Now, right now, looking at the tool, Stevenson is crushing Howard. But once again, the caveat being, if indeed that gets tighter and we have Damian Harris back in the mix, I'm sure that percentage comes a lot closer. But right now, it's 96-4. It's very tight. Let's see if we can do another one here. Chuba Hubbard, who we already know, not too fond of here on the show, or Tony Pollard. We'll start with you here in this one, Andrew Erickson. Who would you rather start, Tony Pollard or Chuba Hubbard?
I mean, it's Tony Pollard for me. Like, I'm not touching Chuba Hubbard with the 10-foot pole. The guy is super game script dependent. I have Amir Abdullah ranked higher than him because you just look at how this game's going to play out. Carolina's going to fall behind. Tampa Bay gives up the second most receptions to running backs, and Hubbard doesn't catch passes. It's Amir Abdullah. So I'd rather play Abdullah than Hubbard, and I would definitely rather play Tony Pollard, who is the most explosive running back on the Dallas Cowboys hot team.
Yes, he is. Hell yeah. How about you there, Pat? Chuba Hubbard or Tony Pollard? Who would you rather start this week?
I'm with Andrew on this one. I'd rather go with Pollard. More splash play potential. And as Andrew pointed out, the game against Tampa just doesn't really set up that well for Chuba. Tampa being more the team you want to attack through the air. So
I agree with you guys. Man. I'm with you guys, but the experts are not with us. 62% still on Chuba Hubbard. Only 38% for Tony Pollard. I guess we're in the 38, and I'm fine being there. I want to live there. That's where I want to be. All right, let's talk a little wide receiver here and talk about the guys in the top 30 that we're a little concerned with. I'm certainly concerned with Terry McLaurin. The numbers are definitely trending in the wrong direction. He's had some injury issues. He's ranked wide receiver 20, but he's only had one double-digit game in half PPR scoring since week 8. Taylor Heineke obviously didn't play yesterday, but once again, they're expecting him to be back, but it's a tough situation here. And I'm getting to a point with Terry McLaurin, too, where I'm desperate for points, and I can't imagine a lot of playoff teams have been surviving down the stretch here and then moving on with Terry McLaurin because the guy just hasn't performed for whatever reason or a myriad of reasons. They can just pile them on at this point, but I think it's almost this point where you can sit him. Like, I don't care. He's still ranked 20, and I think that's just on name brand recognition because he is not getting it done. I know DK Metcalf hasn't been getting it done either. I'm getting a ton of questions on him. Pat, that's somebody that you actually are really concerned with too this week, yes?
Yes. Yeah. How can you not be? The production just hasn't been there. I mean, there's just like kind of nothing to hang your hat on from recent weeks. So like, no, if I can avoid him in my starting lineup, I would.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, it's hard to sit big names, Pat.
I know.
But at this point, you've got to get points, right? You've got to move on. You've got to advance. You're talking about championships here. And, what seemed good at the time or what seemed good last year, you got to shake that off and kind of live in the now to a certain extent with these guys, especially at the wide receiver position where you have more options. Andrew, is there somebody for you in that top 30 wideouts that is really concerning this week?
It's Amari Cooper. Where is this guy gone? So over the last 3 weeks, so he's actually run just 2 fewer routes than CeeDee Lamb, and he has a 15% target share and a 16% target rate per route run. So he's on the field, but he's not being targeted behind guys like Lamb. Lamb's seeing all the targets. Michael Gallup is seeing more why are we not ranking Gallup ahead of Cooper? They both play the same amount of snaps.
It's fair.
What's the difference? So I don't see why Amari Cooper is such a better play than Michael Gallup, and just the fact that there are so many guys in an offense that still wants to run the football despite having a bunch of injured running backs. Dak has been off the last couple weeks. I know that he should be set up to do well against the football team. But they're going to get guys back from the COVID list potentially, so I don't think their defense is going to be nearly as bad as it was on Tuesday night, at least in the secondary. So, look, what are you hoping for Amari Cooper? Amari Cooper's had one good game with Dak. It was against Tampa Bay, and that was week 1.
Right. That's a while ago. It's week 16. Could you imagine, guys, if I told you going into the draft, right? You came out of the draft with Terry McLaurin, DK Metcalf, and Amari Cooper as your wide receiver core. What would you think about that, right? You'd be thinking, that's pretty good. And here we are at week 16, and we don't want to play any of those guys. That's incredible, right? Those are 3 big-name 1A wide receivers that you would feel really good about having. How do you account for this, Pat?
Yeah, I don't know that you'd be shocked if maybe Terry McLaurin didn't have things go right for him at quarterback, but I think you would have been shocked to know that you couldn't really trust Dak Prescott or Russell Wilson late in the 2021 regular season, and both of those guys have been terrible lately.
But McLaurin's MO has always been he's the guy that's quarterback proof, right? It doesn't matter. He plays with all these jabroni quarterbacks, and he still always puts up numbers. Well, I don't know. I guess Taylor Heineke's found a new low, and now we got a Gilbert, and God knows what else is going on there. So
we thought Allen Robinson was QB proof too, Joe, and that didn't work out
That's
well.
That's another guy you could throw in there. All those 1A guys really let us down. If you faded wide receiver, it actually hurt you this year. You could actually make that argument. All those guys that were the, fail safe, we could just take them in the 4th round, 3rd round kind of guys, start the wide receiver there. Not a lot of those guys have worked out, and a couple of them got hurt last week too, in Evans and Godwin. You don't even have them anymore. Just tough, man. It's been a brutal year in 2021, no doubt about that. But let's try to turn the page. Let's be positive for a second. Andrew Erickson, give me 2 guys at the wide receiver position that you feel like starting this week that you think are going to be really good starts.
All right, so I know we just talked about wide receivers having terrible quarterbacks, and this wide receiver definitely has a terrible quarterback. So I'm talking about DJ Moore.
Nice segue.
But DJ Moore has been able to overcome, kind of the carousel at quarterback he's had this year. He's been just the clear alpha in his passing game. He owns a 35% target share with Cam Newton under center over the last 4 weeks. So whenever Cam throws the ball, it's going to DJ Moore. No doubt about it, it's going to DJ Moore. And as Pat alluded to earlier when we were talking about Chuba Hubbard, how do you beat the Bucs? Or how do you compete with the Bucs? Is you have to throw the ball. They allowed the 2nd most receptions to wide receivers this season and over the last 4 weeks. So I just believe in the talent with Moore. And it's hard to rest your head on that and be like, oh, why are you going to start DJ Moore? Well, because he's really talented. But he is. And he's been able to overcome playing alongside Cam Newton. He got it done last week, even in a tougher matchup against the Buffalo Bills. It wasn't, this explosive, top 12 performance. It was still good enough that you weren't why did I start DJ Moore? Now he actually has a good matchup, against a banged-up Tampa Bay Buccaneers secondary. I expect them to have to throw the football, and we know where it's going. So I feel good about DJ Moore this week.
All right, so DJ Moore is one. I agree with you. I feel good, and I'm actually rolling him in a couple lineups as well. Who's another wide receiver in that wide receiver 3/4 grouping that you feel good about?
I like Darnell Mooney. So even when Allen Robinson has missed games, I don't know if he's going to be coming back. He was placed on the COVID list before last week's game. But Mooney's been the wide receiver 1 in this offense all year long. From a routes run perspective, he was always running ahead of Allen Robinson. So the team views Mooney as the clear-cut, wide receiver 1 in the season or on the team. So I just think that him and Fields just missed on a couple big plays. Fields missed him twice in the end zone. I just don't think that's going to happen 2 weeks in a row. I'm not afraid of the Seahawks. second most receiving yards allowed to wide receivers over the last 2 weeks. They couldn't stop Cooper Kupp. They just couldn't stop. It just depends on where.
Well, they can't stop anyone. And then when they lost Jamal Adams too, they lost their best player on their defense. So that's,
I think Mooney's clearly the number one target in the passing game. So whether Robinson comes back or not, I have a lot of confidence in Mooney. I think he's really ranked honestly way too low. Outside the top 30 as a guy that's been demanded a very high target share this season.
Could not agree more with you 100%, and I'm rolling Mooney out in a lot of flex spots this week and his wide receiver 3 in a couple other leagues. How about for you, Pat, when you're looking at the fringe guys here, who's a good wide receiver flex play for you this week?
Well, it's funny, Joe. You talked about Terry McLaurin, DK Metcalf, those guys being like surprise fades at this point in the season. It almost feels like low-hanging fruit to name Gabriel Davis as a must-play at this point, but I mean, I think he kind of is, and I know he came up on the show last week and start sit, but how can he not now with Manny Sanders probably not back this week, Cole Beasley on the COVID list, surprise, but Davis has been just such a playmaker this year. 16.2 yards per catch and 10.2 yards per target, which is just freakish. He's we can point to touchdown percentage being kind of a fluky thing, but he's now pretty consistently, 2 years in a row, 20% of his receptions have resulted in touchdowns. And I love his pairing with Josh Allen, a dude who isn't afraid to take shots to a guy who's covered downfield. I also think Stephon Diggs is probably going to get J.C. Jackson in this matchup against the Patriots, the tougher matchup. That's going to leave Gabriel Davis on Jalen Mills. A winnable matchup, I think, for Davis. So I just think this is a really nice spot for him, and he's very worthy of flex consideration, if not wide receiver 3 consideration.
And you know what's funny, guys? It's sometimes better late than never, right? I know going into this year, Darnell Mooney and Gabriel Davis, if you go back and watch all of our old draft coverage, which is probably hilarious to do now, right? Some of the things that we said, probably way off. Some things probably very good, I would imagine, too. But Gabriel Davis, Darnell Mooney were 2 guys that I know I was drafting in all of those draft specials late, and here we are in week 16. If you held on and you had faith, or maybe you dropped and you re-added them, all of a sudden they become good options. And another guy, too, for you, Pat, is going to have a lot of opportunity this week that you want to start, too, in Green Bay.
We think Alan Lazard, assuming that MVS stays on the COVID list, which he's probably going to since they play on Christmas, it would probably be hard for MVS to test out before then. So that makes Lazard the clear number 2. I think we can lock him in for at least an 85% snap share. And the quality of targets from Aaron Rodgers is obviously a big deal. And when Rodgers has limited options, when it's basically just going to be Devonta Adams and Alan Lazard, and maybe a little Equinemius St. Brown mixed in at wide receiver. Not a lot of firepower at tight end with DeGuara and Mercedes Lewis. I think you're going to see a pretty decent target outlook for Lazard, 7 or 8, and pretty good touchdown chances in a matchup like this. And it's just elevated outlook with the MVS absence. I think he's a top 40, if not top 35 wide receiver this week.
All right, Andrew, let's bounce back to you. Tell me about 2 wide receivers that you do not want to start this week in week 16.
I do not want to start Chase Claypool for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I mean, he's been, the quintessential boomer bust fantasy wide receiver 3. He's failed to crack the top 24 receivers since week 5. And he's continuously running less routes than Ray McLeod. It's super annoying how we have this super talented guy that we all know should be playing more, and he's not. He's running similar routes to James Washington. It's not like we're talking about let's play James Washington this week. He's no. So Claypool, it's just a terrible matchup. I hate on the road against the Kansas City Chiefs. A surging defense, 6th fewest fantasy points per game to wide receivers over the last 4 weeks. Chiefs have also allowed just a 51.0 passer rating on targets to receivers lined up on the outside, which ranks 2nd over the last 4 weeks. So it's just, Big Ben at quarterback, terrible road matchup. And this game could even be less exciting overall if we don't see Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill. So we couldn't even get we might not even get the Big Ben garbage time. That's a big, that's what fuels all these fantasy points for these Steelers receivers. So yeah, I'm out on Claypool this week.
All right. So Claypool is out. Who else is out for you, Andrew?
So I don't really like AJ Green that much this week. So I think that we're all kind of like waiting to see, okay, like Hopkins is out. We had a couple games without Hopkins earlier in the year. How would it shake out now that we know that he's out for the rest of the regular season? Will Green like step up? And really, it wasn't Green. It was Kirk, that saw the majority of routes and targets, and then Zach Ertz. So we really saw Green kind of fall to third in the pecking order, and that's just not like good enough for me. Like, yes, he saw a lot of targets because the Cardinals had to throw the ball a lot, but he only saw a 15% target share. And the Colts have been really good against wide receivers as of late. Allowed the fewest fantasy points per game, 2 wide receivers since week 12. They haven't given up 100 yards to a receiver since week 8. You have the running backs involved for Arizona. So, yeah, I just don't like A.J. Green. And look, this has been a good year where you fade these old, dusty, veteran wide receivers. Like, they've all fallen off cliffs after starting off the season. Like, oh, Sanders, like, here we go. Like, he's back. It's like, no, he's not. And I just don't want to play A.J. Green in week 16 with fantasy football playoffs on the line.
You're right about the Colts, too. Kenny Moore played great last Saturday against the New England Patriots in that game, and we all know how good Darius Leonard is when he drops back into coverage, too. So, all of a sudden, that Colts defense, I think, got a huge boost in that game Saturday against the Pats, and they should be very confident going into this one. Who are you not confident about at wide receiver, Pat, when it comes to Week 16?
Boy, I almost want to piggyback on Andrew with Claypool. My friend Michael Salfino of The Athletic has a great description for him: all tools, no toolbox. And that's pretty apt. But I'm going to go with DeVonta Smith. I mean, I mentioned that stat earlier about the Eagles running it 63% of the time since week 8. And in that stretch, DeVonta Smith has seen 6 or fewer targets in every game. That's a 7-game period. And he's had some real clunkers over that stretch. 1 for 15, 2 for 22, 2 for 15. He's been out-targeted by Dallas Goedert the last 2 weeks, 15-9. Just not really seeing a lot here. And as Andrew mentioned, like, Philly's probably going to have a real favorable game script against the Giants. Just don't want to invest in the talent here when the situation just kind of looks so unfavorable.
All right, let's take a quick break in the action and tell everybody about TickPick, because people are back in NFL stadiums, and you've got a chance to be back in 2022 because TickPick is giving 5 huge season ticket packages away. All you got to do is check out tickpick.com/pros. That's right, 5 chances to get season tickets for the 2022 NFL season, and those packages are valued at $3,000 a piece. So head over to tickpick.com/pros. Again, that's tickpick.com/pros. And don't forget, if you're just looking for NFL tickets here, end of the year, it's a great place to buy them as well. And when you do, download the app and use that promo code PROS for $10 off your first order when you select Zip at checkout. Zip allows you to, basically pay it later there for installments without any service fees. We all know whenever you're trying to buy tickets for any event, the service fees are the worst thing in the world, and Zip helps out with that. So TickPick and Zip together, that is a combination you cannot beat. But once again, you got to go over there and get involved at tickpick.com/pros. All right, gentlemen, let's play another game of Who Should I Start? And hopefully none of the guys that we picked are now unavailable, and this can be a little smoother here. For this one, this should be easy, I guess, from the conversation we just had, but let's see what the experts say. Chase Claypool or Darnell Mooney? Pat Fitzmaurice, who would you rather start this week?
Yeah, I got to go with Mooney, even though I'm not feeling real great about Justin Fields as a passer these days. It will be interesting to see if Allen Robinson is available this week. I think he will be, but Mooney is pretty much proven to be the number 1 guy in Chicago all year. So yeah, I'm going to go with Mooney, and again, not really afraid of that Seattle secondary.
Make it 2 for 2. I'm with Mooney as well. Andrew Erickson, you want a clean sweep this bad boy?
I'm going to go down on Mooney as well.
There you go. And you know what's funny? It's not even close. The ECR, the expert consensus, says Chase Claypool, 73%. But look at us again in the minority. We beat it to our own drummer here on the show, the 3 of us. And I like that. We're out there. We know exactly the guys we like, the guys we don't. What do you think about the safer, quote-unquote, kind of guys, too? Let's talk about Jakobi Meyers and Jarvis Landry this week. Andrew Erickson, who would you rather start? Similar profiles here. No real ceiling on these guys, but you would think a floor at the very least. Jakobi Meyers or Jarvis Landry, who would you rather start?
I think I'm going to go with the experts here and go with Jakobi Meyers. I think that we saw when Mac Jones was forced to throw in that last game on Saturday night, it was Jakobi Meyers that he was forcing a lot of his targets to. Meyers saw 26% target share, over 100 air yards. He had 2 end zone targets, which is a rarity for Jakobi Meyers, who just doesn't really get a lot of looks near the goal line. So I think that if a scenario where the Patriots are forced to throw, if the Bills do score up on them early, Jakobi Meyers is getting the rock. And I think it's important to note, Nelson Aguilar got hurt in that game. He left with a head injury, and Kendrick Bourne has been placed on the COVID list. So he may not suit up, and that just means, look, as much as I would love to see N'Keal Harry get more targets and playing time, it's probably just going to be the Jakobi Meyers show and Hunter Henry are going to see concentrated targets towards those two guys. And I really think this Bills secondary is not that as good as the season-long stats would indicate, especially because, it's inflated because of that one game where the Patriots still didn't throw the ball at all, and they don't have Tre'Davious White. So
yeah, well, the White, I think you can basically just mark that on your calendar as when this secondary lost a huge step there. You just can. So, even that game, you take it with a grain of salt, the one you're talking about against the Pats where, nobody threw the ball at all. Even before that, you were like, well, things are going to really start to show up whenever you have to move up a cornerback, right, from your number 2 to your number 1 and vice versa, 3 and 2 and all that stuff. It eventually shows itself.
Right, yeah. And with Landry, just I look at Baker Mayfield's box score stats, and I don't think he's had 20 fantasy points in a single game this year. I just the Browns passing attack is so anemic, even more than the Patriots passing attack, which I think is probably mediocre at best. I think that Myers probably honestly has more upside, and Landry has not been working as the wide receiver 1 for Cleveland. He's running technically behind Donovan Peoples-Jones in terms of routes run. So yes, Landry's kind of that safety blanket, but I just don't have a lot of faith in the Browns passing game.
All right, when it comes to safety blankets, who makes you all warm and fuzzy, Pat Fitzmaurice, between Landry and Jakobi Meyers?
Oh, man, this is such a gross choice, Joe. I got to go with Landry. Slight edge. I know what Andrew mentioned, that the end zone targets and the air yards for Jakobi, but over his career, it's just been such empty volume. 10 yards a catch, no splash plays, no touchdowns. It's just, man, I'd rather bank on Landry turning a little short area catch into a big play. I know Landry's talented. I don't know that Jakobi Meyers is a really good player. So that's just kind of a subjective thing to go on here rather than anything meaty and
statistically based.
Yes, exactly. So but yeah, hopefully I'm not in a position where I have to choose between these guys, but if I did, I think I'd go with Landry.
I think I'm going to go with Landry too. I actually don't like the fact that the other guys are hurt for the Patriots. I think the more wide receivers on the field, the better it is potentially for Meyers, because if he becomes the focus, I don't know if he's that kind of guy. And as you said, Landry has shown that he does have that ability every now and again to have that big breakaway game and actually find the end zone. Meyers, not so much. So I'm going to go with you on that one. And once again, Pat, we're in the minority. 39%, Jakobi Meyers 61%. So the experts agree with Andrew Erickson. Let's move on to the next grouping here of quarterbacks. I'm going to be fading Taysom Hill, a quarterback, this week. He is the 10th ranked QB on the board. I think the book is out a little bit on Taysom Hill. I think we all know, the NFL knows what he does well and what he doesn't do well. And if you can kind of corral him a little bit, you're going to be able to contain him. And when you do, it's not going to be as good. Now, he's probably a fringy QB1 still regardless for me. But for me, going against the Miami D this week, who's played much better in the second half of the season, to me, he's not a lock QB1. I can make a case for a lot of guys this week over him, I think, in that fringe that I feel pretty good about, including guys like Cousins and Garoppolo that I would still put in that conversation. And obviously, if Lamar's healthy, another guy that you feel good about. So Taysom Hill, okay. I don't feel great about it. Pat, when it comes to the quarterback position, who is a little concerning for you, or maybe you're fading in that QB1 discussion?
We mentioned this earlier, but Dak has just been really off lately. And over the last 5 weeks, he has been the quarterback 17 in fantasy.
Wow.
And this is despite, over that span, he has attempted 41.2 passes a game. He's getting this big pass volume and can't make anything happen. And I'm stealing this. I don't know where I saw this on Twitter, so I apologize to whoever's stat I'm stealing. But I guess there had been 17 times in Dak's career that he had averaged fewer than 6 yards per attempt in a game. And 5 of those games have been since the start of November.
Wow.
6.1.
What do you attribute that to?
So, I mean, like just watching the games, like his ball placement has been terrible. He just can't hit open receivers. I know The Athletic just ran an article with their beat writer saying that it's kind of the same thing that we saw happen with Mahomes and some other quarterbacks earlier in the season where they were seeing a lot of like cover two and too high safety looks. And like Dak's been having trouble with that. But to me, it's just been like ball placement. I don't know if it's something mechanical or whatever, but Dak is just missing open receivers.
All right.
So that's what I've seen. But anyway, it's been weird. He's got all his weapons healthy. He's just missing guys. So I'm not feeling wildly confident in him this week.
All right, Andrew, who are you not feeling wildly confident in at the quarterback position this week?
The GOAT, Tom Brady, TB12, calling him out because I've seen
That's
Brady.
a dangerous game, buddy.
Hey,
just want to put that out there.
why did Brady leave New England? Oh, because he didn't have any weapons and because he couldn't produce without weapons. So now he's down Chris Godwin, Leonard Fournette, potentially Mike Evans, who I personally don't think is going to play. Whenever they label guys day to day, they usually don't play that next week. So if he's down all these guys, and yes, I understand Antonio Brown is coming back. Huzzah. The Messiah has returned from his suspension. Like, great. And I do think Antonio Brown's like a great play this week. But if you look at, Carolina, it's a road game, underrated defense. If you look at the Panthers, they are second in the NFL in fewest yards per play allowed, second passing yards allowed per game this season, under 200 passing yards. They haven't allowed any quarterback to throw for more, or they only allowed one quarterback to throw for over 270 passing yards against them. So they're a team that teams have had a lot of success running the football, and Brady knows that, hey, do I need to pad my stats now, or do I want to win football games? Like, if they want to beat the Panthers, it would be smart for them to actually run the football, because that may be a stronger part of their offensive game plan than throwing it with backup wide receivers out there. So, yeah, Brady, that's what I'll say about Tom Brady.
I'm gonna take the other end of that one, Andrew. I'm gonna take the polar opposite on that one. Angry Tom Brady is the best Tom Brady. The Saints always give him problems for whatever reason. Some teams are just other teams or other players' kryptonites, and he's got AB, and he loves AB. And you talk about Bruce Arians today, talking about AB looks just fine to me, and he's still got
Bruce
Gronk.
Arians says a lot of things, a lot of things that don't always come to fruition.
He does. But have you watched the Carolina Panthers play football the last few weeks? They're going to make mistakes. And look, I like the Carolina Panthers D. They're a young bunch. They're hungry. They fly around there. It's a fast group. But at the same time, they're still a little green. And old man Tom Brady's still got a few tricks up his sleeve. I am not worried about Tom Brady this week. So I'm going to take the polar opposite. I feel very good about Brady this week. In fact, I feel great about Brady. I even talked about him on the DFS show. I think this is angry Tom Brady at his best, coming out and fired up. And just like when there were rumors about him years and years ago about, is this the end of Tom Brady and the on to Cincinnati game? Well, don't count him out just yet. Just saying. All right, let's move on to the rest of the guys here at Superflex. Some of the guys on the fringe of that, guys like Matt Ryan, Cam Newton, Jared Goff, and Taylor Heineke are questionable this week here. You got Mac Jones. It's not a great grouping, but I'm going to throw two names at you guys and ask you, who should you start? Cam Newton or Matt Ryan? Andrew Erickson, we'll start with you. Would you rather go with Cam Newton here versus Tampa, or Matt Ryan on paper against Detroit, who's not been the cakewalk everybody thinks they should be recently?
I'm going to go with Matt Ryan. It's really and I know I can get burned by Cam because of the rushing. If he scores a rushing touchdown, then you lose. Like, you just got to eat the L. And that's why it's always hard to project these rushing quarterbacks, because the rushing touchdown just sways so much in their favor that it puts them up so much higher above some of the non-mobile quarterbacks. But if they don't score, with Cam, it's been like every other week. It's like the week that we think he's going to do good, he sucks. and then the week that we tell people not to play him, he does good because he just scores the rushing touchdowns, every other week, it seems like. So I'm just going to take a player that I think that, again, not like uber confident in, but I just kind of know what I'm going to get out of Matt Ryan. Like, I think, he's playing a really bad defense. They don't have a pass rush, which is part of the reason why I think Matt Ryan can be successful as PFF's 10th highest graded quarterback from a clean pocket this year. So the pressure has really been Matt Ryan's biggest issue. Like, a lot of his lowlights, I should say, this year have been him, like, under pressure, like, under, like, insane disarray. But when he has a clean pocket, I think they can get the ball to Pitts, to Russell Gage against a secondary that I'm not really afraid of. So I will go with Matt Ryan.
All right, you heard everybody. Whenever he says to sit him, then you start Cam Newton. There you go. So play the opposite when it comes to Andrew Erickson when it's Cam Newton. How about you, Pat, for these two guys, Matt Ryan or Cam Newton when it comes to Superflex?
So I'm going to give you a conditional answer, Joe. I actually have, I have Cam Newton ranked one spot higher, I think. But it really depends on what my outlook is in a fantasy playoff game. Like if I'm an underdog, I want to take the swing with Cam Newton in that rushing yardage because we just saw him have like the worst 25-point fantasy game you will ever see. And it was all through the rushing. And he can have that. Like he can have the 2-touchdown rushing game. He can have the 80-yard rushing game. And like his terrible passing stats don't matter. And, as Andrew said, you know what you're going to get with Matt Ryan. You're going to get like the 240 yards and 1 touchdown. And if I'm like a favorite, I just want to lock that in and beat my opponent at the other positions. But if I need to really land a haymaker, like I'm going with Cam.
That's fair enough. All right, when you're looking at the fringe of QB1 too, guys, just, with Lamar's been hurt, we're expecting him to come back and play. Do you feel good about any of these guys as QB1s? Do you feel good about Fields? Do you feel good about Garoppolo, Cousins, Wilson? Are any of those guys in that conversation where, with Lamar's health being questionable, would you start any of those guys over Lamar Jackson, Pat? Wilson, Cousins, Garoppolo, or Fields? Because I'm sure a lot of teams in those single QB leagues have that kind of decision to make.
Yeah, I personally would not start any of them over Lamar. Okay. I would go down swinging with Lamar. But if I had to, choose one of those guys to kind of stream, I think I'd go with handsome Jimmy G. And kind of for the same reason I liked Roethlisberger last week, and it sort of backfired, just the matchup against Tennessee with the pass funnel defense. Like teams throw on them 64% of the time. They're easier to throw on than run on. And he's got all those weapons. He's got Kittle, he's got Samuel, he's got Ayuk. So, and Jimmy's actually been pretty good. I think since week 9, he's averaged 16.5 fantasy points a game, which is the same as Lamar Jackson over that period. So I'm still going with Lamar if that's the choice, but I don't mind Jimmy G as like a streaming possibility.
How about you, Andrew? Would you start any of those guys over Lamar? And if not, who is the guy that comes closest to having that conversation about?
No, I agree with Pat. I would definitely just roll with Lamar Jackson. I mean, I've seen enough stinkers from Wilson, Cousins, Garoppolo to be like, I'm just going to play the guy that I know could rush for 100 yards, and he's probably the only guy. The only player I would consider would be Fields. I've talked about Fields a lot on the Start Sit show, and I just think that he's always like egregiously ranked low in the ECR, despite the fact that he's been a top 10 quarterback the last 4 starts that he's had fully completed the game because he's running. Yeah. He got there on a lucky touchdown at the end of the game, but it's because he didn't connect on a touchdown with Mooney earlier in the game. So I don't think we can just like cherry pick one specific play. Like, oh, well, that's why he got there. It's like, oh yeah, well, he missed on a touchdown earlier in the game. So I don't think, yes, some of the yardage was fluky at the end, but I think that he still had, a decent game. It was a good spot for him. And again, I'm talked about Mooney, not afraid of the Seattle secondary. It's not like they're going to, fear off anybody. And Justin Fields runs, so over 50 rushing yards per game average over his last 6 games.
All right, let's move on to the tight end position. I'm not fading anybody in the top tier of tight end because I just don't have that kind of problem with anybody enough. I'm not a big fan of any of the guys at the bottom of tight end 1. They're all that clump to me. But Andrew, is there somebody that sticks out to you as somebody that you're really not feeling so hot about this week?
Just Hunter Henry, because he's just a very game script dependent touchdown. Like things have to work really well in his favor for him to score a lot of fantasy points. And the Bills have actually allowed the fewest red zone targets to tight ends this season. Only 3 receiving touchdowns to tight ends this year. We know Hunter Henry's bread and butter is finding the end zone. So if he doesn't score a touchdown, you may be in trouble with Hunter Henry.
All right, so Hunter Henry's concerning for Andrew. How about you, Pat? Anybody that's concerning for you at tight end 1 this week?
Noah Fant. Hasn't had more than 59 yards in a game or a touchdown since mid-October, and it seems pretty unlikely we're going to get a spike game out of him with Drew Lock at quarterback, especially when Drew Lock is the former college teammate of Albert Okwuegbunam. So when you're I don't really like the too many mouths to feed argument all that much, but when you're talking about Denver with 3 good receivers, 2 good tight ends, 2 good running backs you want to feed the ball, and it's Drew Lock in charge of the target distribution, get me off of all those guys.
It's going to be a wild ride.
Fair enough. All right, let's play a little Who Should I Start here. Jared Cook or Cole Kmet? Andrew Erickson, who would you rather start between those guys, Kmet or Cook?
Yeah, I really like Cole Kmet. I like his role in the Bears offense. He has, he saw a 23% target share in week 15. He ranks top 5 in terms of routes run participation, target share among all tight ends over the last 4 weeks. Seahawks defense 6th in fantasy points per game allowed to tight ends over the last 4 weeks. So, yeah, I mean, Kmet's only blemish is that he just doesn't score any touchdowns. This is because Jimmy Graham,
Right.
Jesper Horsted score all the touchdowns. So that's what limits his ceiling. So I would understand if, with a guy like Jared Cook, he definitely has more touchdown equity for that boom potential.
All right, fair enough. How about you there, Pat? Jared Cook or Cole Kmet?
Can I get Jesper Horsted as an option for this one?
You can. You can if you really want it. I'll
all right. I think I would still go with Jared Cook. Just give me the guy connected to a top quarterback.
All right, 73% of people agree with you guys. So Jared Cook wins on the expert consensus. All right, it's that time again, boys and girls. It's time for our top starts and sits of the week. I'll kick things off here with mine. Top start of the week, Gabriel Davis. Is that guy last week we talked about. Worked out. I'm just going to ride the wave. You mentioned before, Pat was trumpeting Gabriel Davis and all the good reasons to start him, so I'm not going to pile on too much there, but Davis certainly has opportunity. He's on the waiver wire in a ton of leagues. Almost 70% of leagues he was available, if not more. So if you haven't already, make sure you go pick him up, and I think you can plug and play him this week. And for me, it's terrible that it's come to this, but Terry McLaurin, I think, is a sit. I just don't feel good about any productivity coming out of him. And it's unfortunate, but there's a lot of big-name wide receivers that have really just let us down. You can throw Cortland Sutton into that pile of Cooper and DK Metcalf and all those guys, and Allen Robinson, too. That tier of wide receiver has been a complete bust, and that is usually never the case. That's where you usually make your money on those steady guys, but none of them have been that at all, and Terry McLaurin certainly has not either. How about you, Andrew Erickson? Who is your must-start and sit for Week 16?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Michael Pittman for the Indianapolis Colts. I think is a must-start this week. Arizona first in fantasy points per game allowed to wide receivers over the last 4 weeks, and if they have to throw, it's going to Michael Pittman. That's that much we know. They don't throw a lot, but when they do, it goes to Pittman. So if they have to throw a little bit more against a high-powered Cardinals offense, I think that Pittman will get the job done. And my sit is Myles Gaskin. I don't know how many carries he's going to get. He's playing the New Orleans Saints. People are ranking Duke Johnson as a top 30 running back, and I'm pulling my hair out trying to figure out why, because it's the Saints. Everyone's numbers get boosted against the Jets. Everyone. And the Saints, complete opposite. So I don't want to touch this backfield any way, shape, or form. Praying for a Monday Night Miracle from a Miami Dolphins running back against the Saints just seems like a terrible way to spend post-Christmas.
I could not agree more. Pat Fitzmaurice, who's your must-start and must-sit for Week 16?
I think we're going to get the Rhamondre Stevenson game in this week that we were hoping for last week against the Colts. I just think they're going to run the ball on Buffalo, that's going to be their MO in this game. And even if Damian Harris does play, I do think Rhamondre Stevenson would get a majority of the carries and would be at least flex-worthy in this one.
All right, quick fly around for Thursday Night Football, San Francisco and Tennessee. Would you start A.J. Brown, guys, now that he is deemed healthy to return? Andrew, I'll start with you on this one. Would you start A.J. Brown?
If I am a massive underdog, if I look at my team versus my opponent's team, and I'm like, oh, I'm clearly, the underdog here. My team is nowhere near how good this other team is. I would chase the upside because it's a good matchup. The 49ers have a very bad secondary. Second most fantasy points allowed wide receivers over the last 4 weeks. And unlike Julio Jones, who can't get through a game, A.J. Brown has actually produced this year. We've actually seen him put up big numbers at times this year. So, yes, I think A.J. Brown would be a guy I would look to start, especially on a Thursday where if he bombs, okay, you can make adjustments based on it. And then if he booms, you can also make adjustments okay, I can play it safer with the rest of my lineup. So I would probably lean towards chasing the upside with A.J. Brown. Pat,
how about for you? What are your thoughts on A.J. Brown?
He's going to be a top 25 guy for me if he does play. I'm with Andrew that the 49ers just don't have a quarterback who can hang with them. So he's a big mismatch. He'd be in for, I'm sure, at least a 25% target share in that game. And, I think you just have to go with quality there and roll him out if he's able.
All right, what about the running back situation for the 49ers? I know it's something that's still kind of fluid here, Pat. How do you approach this? Give me the hypotheticals in your mind and how you would approach each one of them.
I am starting whoever is, if Eli Mitchell is good to go, I'm starting him with confidence. If he's not, and it's Jeff Wilson who's the number one back, I'm starting him with confidence. Okay. That's pretty much it. But I don't think Wilson would be playable if Mitchell was back.
Right, of course. Andrew Erickson, your confidence level in those guys?
Yeah, I think it's kind of the same thing where, whoever is the starter would be the guy that gets the bell cow usage. Except I just don't I think people need to put in perspective that they're not playing the Falcons again. Like, it's a different matchup. The Titans are actually a good run defense, a top 5 run defense. So I think that Wilson putting up another top 10 performance is probably, being a little aggressive. But again, it's really hard to give up the volume of a guy that's going to see the ball 20 times.
All right, fair enough. Don't forget, everybody, you can head over to FantasyPros.com and you can check out all of the rankings, all of our expert consensus rankings, and our individual ones as well. And of course, don't forget about that giveaway we're doing too at FantasyPros.com/contest when you subscribe to our YouTube channel. And don't forget to like this video while you're watching as well. But once you become a subscriber of our YouTube channel, you click that notifications bell, you take a screenshot, and then you head over to FantasyPros.com/contest, and you could win an Alvin Kamara autographed jersey thanks to our friends at PristineAuction.com. I also want to thank the sponsor of today's show. That's TickPick, TickPick.com/pros. Again, at TickPick.com/pros, you can get involved in a chance to win 5 huge season ticket packages for the 2022 season, or get tickets for an NFL game right now. So go check that out at TickPick. And again, have a great Week 16. Good luck to everybody. Hope you stay healthy and your team stay healthy as well. That'll do it for us. For the story of the game goes on. For Andrew Erickson and Pat Fitzmaurice, I'm Joey P. We'll see you next time, kids.
Thanks for tuning in to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. Don't forget to check out our featured videos. And while you're at it, make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Fantasy Pros, so you can get the latest news and updates to give you the edge you need in your fantasy league.